notion of logic.
Thank you. I prefer the concrete, the graspable, the provable.
You'd make a splendid computer, Mr. Spock.
Yahoo! Yahoo!
Tehran slams Berlin's hypocrisy over Zionist nukes. Iranian foreign minister spokesman has slammed as hypocritical Berlin's stance towards Iran's peaceful nuclear program as the European country remains silent on Zionist nuclear arsenal, which is a threat to the region and the world. In a statement on Friday, Nasser Kanani reacted to remarks by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in a joint press conference on Thursday with visiting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It's strange that German officials introduce Iran's peaceful nuclear program, which is under the most strict supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency, as a threat, but say no word about the extensive nuclear arsenal of the fake occupier and the anti-human Zionist regime, which threatens the region and the world, said the spokesman. Scholz repeated the Western countries' claim that Iran was trying to develop nuclear weapons and said that Tehran should not be allowed to have nukes. He also said Germany gives priority to diplomacy for resolving this issue, while also claiming that Iran was a real threat. Independent countries and the world's public opinion are fed up with such double standards and behaviors and are gradually becoming more confident in their conclusion about how far the claims and allegations of some Western governments against the Islamic Republic of Iran are hypocritical and invalid, Kanani added. Iran showed to the world the peaceful nature of its nuclear program by signing the JCPOA with 6 world states, namely the U.S., Germany, France, Britain, Russia, and China in 2015. However, Washington's unilateral withdrawal in May 2018 and its subsequent reimposition of sanctions against Tehran left the future of the deal in limbo. Meanwhile, other signatories to the deal, including Germany, failed to safeguard Iran's interests under the deal. Negotiations between the parties to restore the deal kicked off in Vienna in April 2021 in a bid to salvage the JCPOA. The discussions, however, have been at standstill since August 2022 due to Washington's refusal to remove the sanctions and offer guarantees that it will not exit the agreement again. The West's hype over Iran's nuclear program comes as the Israeli regime's the sole professor of nukes in the Middle East. Zionists, which pursue a policy of deliberate ambiguity about its nuclear weapons, is estimated to possess 200 to 400 nuclear warheads in its arsenal. Despite Iran and the Zionists having not signed the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, and continues its unsupervised nuclear activities with the support of the United States and its European counterparts. And from Ashok al-Assad, Berlin calls for resolving differences over Iran's nuclear file. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on Thursday called for resolving differences over the Iranian nuclear efforts and expressed his concern about the real danger posed by Tehran's program. Speaking alongside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after talks in Berlin, Scholz said Germany and other countries are working to prevent Tehran from obtaining nuclear weapons. Zionists should not be threatened, he affirmed. Meanwhile, Netanyahu wrote in his Twitter account that Zionists will do what they need to do to defend themselves against those who want to annihilate the Zionist state. Zionists will also act against Iran's aggression and terrorism. Those who perpetrate terror attacks against Zionists and those who send them will pay a heavy price, he said. On March 7th, France, Germany, and the UK gave a joint statement to the IAEA Board of Governors on Iran's implementation of its nuclear commitments under the JCPOA. The E3 said they're especially alarmed by the recent sampling at Fordow, which showed the presence of highly enriched uranium particles to 83.7%. And this is significantly inconsistent with the level of enrichment declared by Iran, and Iran has yet to convince us that this was due to its claimed unintended fluctuations, the statement said. Well, the IAEA feels different about that, I think. Early this month, the IAEA said Iran has given sweeping assurances to the UN nuclear watchdog that it finally assist a long-stalled investigation into uranium particles found at undeclared sites and even reinstall removed monitoring equipment. Outside of the removed monitoring equipment, I'm not really sure about the rest of that. This article is going by the wayside, as they say. IAEA is asking Iran for more inspections and the reactivation of surveillance cameras and monitoring equipment at some of the country's nuclear sites. Also, Iran should offer the UN nuclear watchdog convincing explanations on the origin of uranium particles enriched to 83.7% purity, very close to weapons grade at Iran's underground Fordo. Meanwhile, in Tehran, the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran said Thursday that the Deputy Director General and head of the Safeguards Department of the UN nuclear watchdog, IAEA, is on his way to Tehran for talks with Iran officials. Spokesperson for the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, Behruz Kamalvandi, said the Massimo Aparo will pursue the negotiations recently held by experts of the IAEA and those of the AEOI during Grossi's recent visit to Iran this month. Kamalvandi noted that the safeguards and technical discussions will be in line with the joint statement of the IAEA and the AEOI that was issued during the visit. Meanwhile, High Representatives of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy Joseph Borrell called on Iran in a phone call with the Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian to speed up the implementation of the agreement between Tehran and the IAEA, according to Iranian websites. The call came a few hours after Grossi said he's sending a technical team to Iran in the next few days to follow up on Tehran's commitments. We still need to start the process of getting these additional further monitoring and verification capacities, Grossi said, explaining that the process could take maybe weeks or days. I hope that there won't be any trouble, the IAEA chief said, according to Wall Street Journal reporter Lawrence Norman. Also, U.S. Special Envoy for Iran Robert Malley said he met with Grossi and discussed the IAEA chief's recent meetings in Tehran this month. We stressed that Iran should follow through on its commitments made to IAEA and should facilitate any access deemed necessary by the agency, Malley wrote on his Twitter account. Meanwhile, Russia's permanent representative to international organizations in Vienna, Mikhail Ulyanov, said somebody needs to engage the U.S. on finalization of the Vienna talks and restoration of the nuclear deal in order to avoid the high risk of uncontrolled escalation. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the JCPOA, you had to talk about the United States backing out of the JCPOA. That's the reality. It would still be going on, you know. And the CSAT Daily, Schultz voices concerns on Israel overhaul as Netanyahu visits. Germany and Israel share concerns about Iran's nuclear activities. Netanyahu's threatened military action against Iran's nuclear program as it enriches uranium closer to weapons-grade levels. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz voiced concern about the Israeli government's planned overhaul of the country's judicial system as he hosted Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday, offering praise for efforts by a Zionist president to seek a broad basic consensus. Netanyahu met with German leaders in Berlin the day after Zionist President Isaac Herzog unveiled a compromise proposal for overhauling the legal system, an approach that Netanyahu rejected. Lower-level German officials already had voiced concern about the Israeli government's plan, which would allow Parliament to overturn Supreme Court decisions and give Netanyahu's parliamentary coalition the final say over all judicial appointments. Germany is a close ally of Israel in Europe and is tended to refrain from strong public criticism of its government. As close friends of Israel with shared democratic values, we're following this debate very closely, and I can't hide the fact that we're following it with great concern, Schultz said at a news conference along Netanyahu. The independence of the judiciary is a precious democratic asset. We agree on that. It's good and valuable that President Herzog talked to a large of actors in society in order to counter a further polarization of Israel, Schultz said. Allow me to add that I think this search for a broad basic consensus is right and important. Of Herzog's suggestions, Schultz said, as friends of Israel, we would like the last word not to have been spoken on this proposal. Netanyahu showed no sign of being swayed. Zionist was, or Zionism, or Zionist Israel was, is, and will remain a liberal society. The Prime Minister argued that appeals for discussions with the Israeli opposition were met with complete refusal and that there's a desire to reach a moment of crisis, perhaps a governmental breakdown, a search for new elections. If that continues, that's regrettable, but we'll do whatever we think's the right thing to achieve something that corrects the imbalance that exists today between the branches of government and yet, at the same time, could over time be accepted as the best solution for Zionist Israel in line with my principles of keeping Zionist Israel a liberal, balanced democracy. The leading of the Central Council of Jews in Germany, Joseph Schuster, met Netanyahu himself earlier Thursday. Schuster said he voiced concern to the Prime Minister that his government is increasingly dividing Israel's society and is squandering confidence in democratic Israel. German news agency DPA reported. Around 500 Zionist Israelis protested at Berlin's landmark Brandenburg Gate, waving Zionist Israeli flags, singing and holding up banners against Netanyahu's visit. He's destroying our Zionist democracy for the sake of staying out of jail, Nasak Philip, a project manager in construction who moved to Berlin 9 years ago, said. He's sacrificing the whole country to protect himself and his family. Germany and Zionist Israel share concerns about Iran's nuclear activities. Netanyahu has threatened military action against Iran's nuclear program as it enriches uranium closer to weapons-grade levels. Germany is one of those world powers that entered a 2015 deal with Tehran to address concern about Iran's nuclear ambitions. The agreement unraveled after then-President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew the United States. The Jewish state will do everything necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, period, Netanyahu said, without giving details. Our hope is that we will ultimately succeed in preventing this with a diplomatic solution, Schultz said. I know the Jewish state will, a Jewish state should prevent a country from having nuclear weapons if it doesn't have it. But what about a Zionist state? And is the state really Jewish if it has nuclear weapons? I don't know. It's a question. And from The Independent, Netanyahu in Germany amid tensions at home, Iran worries. Zionist Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting Germany's leaders on abbreviated visit that comes in the shadow of tensions over his government's planned overhaul of Israel's judicial system and worried about Iran's nuclear program. Zionist Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting Germany's leaders Thursday. Netanyahu's meetings are scheduled with Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Germany's largely ceremonial president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, on his own day trip to Berlin. The Prime Minister's office said he cut the length of his visit in half because of the security situation in Zionist Israel. He delayed his departure from Israel on Wednesday as the country's figurehead president prepared to unveil a compromise proposal for overhauling the legal system, an approach that Netanyahu rejected. German officials have voiced concerns about Zionist-occupied Palestine government's plan, which would allow Parliament to overturn Supreme Court decisions and give Netanyahu's parliamentary coalition the final say over all judicial appointments. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said when Israeli counterpart visited last month that the protection of the principles of the rule of law, such as judicial independence, was always a hallmark of Zionist Israel. Protests against the overhaul are planned in Berlin, though not near Netanyahu, whose visit's taking place under the customary heavy security. Germany and Israel, which traditionally are close allies, share concerns about Iran's nuclear activities, and Netanyahu has threatened military action against Iran's nuclear program as it enriches uranium closer to weapons-grade levels. Germany is one of the world powers that entered a tattered 2015 deal with Tehran to address concern about its nuclear ambitions. Baerbock stressed the importance of preventing a nuclear escalation by Iran by diplomatic means because every alternative would be disastrous.
What is this nothing you talk about?
I'm going to open up a channel.